Hello friends, this is Growl, and welcome to my newest UI video for Dragonflight Season 4. I've been doing a lot of tweaking, some editing, lots of different stuff, trying to touch things up and get ready for the new expansion, and I figured we'd start off with releasing a new UI video today. So first and foremost, the links to every single add-on, every single profile, and all that stuff is going to be in the description of the video, and hopefully this video can be a hub for you that you can return back if you're ever looking for specific things or anything like that. The video itself, I'm just going to go through all my Weakauras, all my add-ons, and just things that you need to set up this wonderful, hopefully, healer UI. One thing I want to say is that I'm going to go over a long list of add-ons. It's going to be, I think, 13 or 14 different add-ons. I wouldn't recommend just going down the list and downloading every single one. I think add-ons and stuff like that should be taken one piece at a time. So if you see something in the video that you like and you want to integrate, start with that first, get it imported, get it used, and don't over-clutter your UI. But with that being said, we will start with Weakauras. If you're unfamiliar with WoW, you may not know what Weakauras are. It is essentially just a UI mod where you can plug and play different elements and sort of like import different scripts from people and modify the way that your game looks. For example, you can see this little thing going on in the middle of my screen. It has multiple different components. It'll have my energy and my mana, as well as show up with buffs in the middle of the screen, show my spells, my ability cooldowns, and all of this is powered by Weakauras. And the way that you handle this is you simply download the add-on, you type /WA, and then you can see I have a lot of them, probably a lot more than you have. You go to import, and then you just simply paste the import text in here, and then bam, you are good to go. And then once you have that, you'll have your Weakaura in a list here. So my packages, they're all named Growl, and then the spec that it's for. So a couple useful things you can do here, you can expand this and you can see individual pieces. If, for example, you don't want Weakauras or they're doubling up with things that you already have, you can simply delete them out of the package. One more thing you can do, if you click this whole thing, let's say you use a different monitor size and it doesn't quite look right, or you just don't like the way it looks, you can go into group and then group scale. You can move this down or move this up and resize essentially the whole UI together. And if you wanted to, whatever reason, drag it, let's say you wanted it lower on the screen or closer to your character, simply just click in this gray box here and drag it, although I'm not going to do that right now. All right, next is going to be my party frames. This is going to be the newest part of the UI. I'm now no longer using Voodoo. I'm instead using Cell. Cell is essentially does all the same things. Every party add-on really does the same things. I just found that Cell is going to be easier for you to set up and import and get working, and seems to have less problems than Voodoo. It's a little bit more modern, so that's why I switched. If you like any other party frame add-on, I'm not here to convince you to use mine. I'm just here to help you install it if that's what you want to do. So in order to open the Cell options, you can just click on this red box here or type /cell space options. To import the profile, you go to About, you go to Import, and then you paste it right here. And then that should import everything in the profile. However, there's still a few things that you may want to do. For example, if you go to Layouts here, you can see that depending on your group size, you may want different layouts. For example, in Raid, you may not want your frames this big, or you may want them in a different slot. So you can see here when I select the Raid option, it makes my frames small and in the bottom. And if you select the M+ option, it makes them a little bit bigger, so it's easier to see debuffs since you're going to be responsible for everything. So if you go right here, you want to select M+ for the solo and party option, and then Raid for all the other ones. I haven't done any PvP yet since I installed Cell. If you want to do that or set up your own, feel free. Right here, Layout Auto Switch. When you have it on roll, this means that this is going to be true for every single healer that you log into, and then once you switch to DPS, you'll have to reset this up again. If you go here to spec, this is going to make it so you have different profiles for every single spec. Let's say you wanted things slightly different as a Mistweaver or a Disc Priest. This is what you do here, but in general, I just have mine set to roll. The profile should work well for every single healer spec. One thing to note, I use this bar animation smooth in the appearance section. I think it looks cool. However, I have heard that it's a little bit of an FPS hog, and if you're playing on a less than good computer or you're experiencing some sort of frame rate issues with Cell, the first thing I would do is turn this off and probably go to none. Just a little, a small thing to add in there. Next, if you want to add any buffs, let's say there's a buff on this on that you're not tracking. Maybe it's some weird trinket you got from an old raid, or maybe it's like a tier set that hasn't quite been added yet, you know, on patch day. You simply go to indicators, then you go to healers, and then this is where all of your hot icons and everything that appears in the bottom left will be right here. And so you need to fetch the spell ID of that item. If you certain add-ons, if you mouse over the icon, it'll tell you the spell ID. Otherwise, you may have to look it up on Wowhead. So if you want to add something, for instance, like a tier set, you simply just hit this plus. It'll come up with a little box, and then you type in the spell ID, and then bam, it'll find it. And likewise, it works the same for debuffs. Let's say you are, this should in theory track every debuff, but let's say there's a debuff that's tracking that you don't want to track, you know, some weird effect that's on your entire party for the whole dungeon. You simply go to this debuffs tab here, and then you can add it to the blacklist, and then same thing, you just type in the spell ID, and then you'll no longer see this. I have some things added to my blacklist, like some trinkets, but in general, this is something that you want to know how to use in case there's stuff that you don't want to see. Another feature you can do here is you can check this box, and this makes it so you can Alt-Control right-click on stuff just to remove it. Let's say you're not so good, or, you know, you're like, what the heck is this? I don't even know what this buff is. You can just check this and then Alt-Control right-click, and it'll automatically add it to your blacklist. However, you don't want to play with this on, because this means that your icons are not click-throughable, because it's trying to see what you're doing when you mouse over an icon. So don't play with this on, but if you're trying to troubleshoot, this is a handy feature. Alright, so next, one thing you may notice is that some of the things in my UI, specifically my spell icons, might look a little bit different than yours. This is because I use an add-on called Masque, and Masque simply is just gives you custom skins for like certain buttons and things in the UI. The one that I use is Clean UI Black. However, you can see there's a bunch of different options, and there may even be plugins that you can use as well. So again, I'll have a link to Masque in the description, but this is basically just install it, select the option, and you're good to go. Everything on my party frames is going to be from my Cell add-on, except for the stuff on the left side. It's not showing up because I'm not in a group right now, but if you want to see cooldowns of your party members, it's an add-on called OmniCD. And this add-on is very easy to set up as well. I highly recommend you set up the add-on yourself, because if you have a bunch of spells that you're not going to track, again, it's going to add clutter. It's very, very easy to set up. You just go to Dungeons and then the Spell tab, and then you can simply just say, okay, I want to see this, I don't want to see this. This will be your kick tracker, this will be your global, like, whatever, you know, stop tracker and stuns. This will show your defensive cooldowns on the left side. A couple features of OmniCD, if you go to, again, Dungeons, and then General, you click here to show your own. For some reason, it doesn't show your own by default, which is a little bit annoying. Also, you go to Position. Let's say you want to make your frames horizontal, or let's say you want to show on the right side for whatever reason. You can simply change where it shows up here, and you can offset it if you want to move it in some direction. But basically, everything that you need to configure is going to be in these two tabs here. Next is my skill bars. You can see on the bottom, I have sort of like grayed out of the way skill bars. This is stuff I never look at. It's simply just there to set keybinds, especially for things that I don't have with mouse overs. And I use an add-on called Bartender. Unfortunately, Bartender doesn't really use profiles. Like, I can't export it for you to copy. However, they've upgraded the skill bars in WoW since I've used Bartender, and to be honest, you really don't even need an add-on to use those. You could do almost all this simply with just the base UI and edit mode, and that's probably what I would recommend you do. Also, for newer players anyway, you may want all this visible and bigger so that you can see your keybinds while you're learning, but unfortunately no copying for Bartender, but that is what I use for this stuff. Next is my nameplates. For nameplates, I use an add-on called Plater. In Plater, you can go to slash Plater, and then you go to Profiles, and then this is where you import it here. This is essentially purely plug and play. You shouldn't need to do anything here. It has insane amounts of customization. If you want to, you can color specific enemies or casts or create HP thresholds or almost anything you would ever want to do. However, you don't need to do that. You can simply just import the profile. The profile that I use is a very close spin-off of Dorky's. He actually goes through most of the time and changes some of the spellcaster mobs. I believe the way he has it set up is mobs that needed to be stunned have like a light pink color, and mobs that need to be interrupted have a blue color. That's at least the current setup. We'll see if that changes in the future. So next is Details. In the bottom right, Details is an add-on that most people are familiar with. This is simply just a tracks your damage. You can also use it to see death logs and healing and all that. I will have a link to my Details profile as well in the description. This little box right here that shows my actions. Personally, I guess you could use it for review, but the only reason that I have it is mainly for streaming. So if you wanted to turn this off, the command is simply /streamer to open this plugin, assuming that you have Details set up, and then this is where you can enable it, disable it, or change the settings of it however you want. Next, unfortunately, with everything I have, I don't really like the current target frame and focus frame that are in the game, so I use an add-on called Shadowed Unit Frames only for those two things. Shadowed Unit Frames is a whole lot of other stuff, including having its own party frames and all that. However, I'm literally only using it just for this. So if you want to get that installed, you go to /SUF. One thing you'll notice here is that if you don't have the advanced checkbox checked, you actually can import a profile. I don't know why this is, but simply just press the checkbox there, then you can go to Layout Manager, import the code there. And yeah, I have basically every feature of this disabled except for these two frames, just because I like these bars rather than having the in-game sort of portrait thing. Lastly, in terms of combat add-ons is Bigwigs. I would highly recommend Bigwigs, and then it's other add-on Little Wigs, one for dungeons, one for raids. For my Bigwig setup, I actually have bars that appear in the middle of my screen when anything is upcoming, 10 seconds or more. I don't know if you would necessarily like this. Personally, I would highly recommend you customize your Bigwigs or use it as default. This sort of thing can be really annoying, especially if you don't know what to do about it or don't know what to look at. But I find this useful for certain mechanics. I also use Bigwigs to have sound effects on specific mechanics, and so I kind of have it weirdly configured in a way that it makes sense to me, but it's not necessarily something that I would recommend everyone set up. I may, if there is a profile, have this, looks like I don't even know if I can export this, but you don't even want my Bigwigs profile anyway. Just know that that's how I have this set up in the middle. And also, if you are wondering about how I'm having custom sounds on boss abilities or countdowns, everything is done through Bigwigs. And that pretty much wraps up the normal add-ons that you'll see during combat. I do want to include a couple other useful add-ons or just cosmetic stuff that people tend to ask about as well. First being friend groups. You can see here that my friends list looks a little bit different, and I can also add people. For example, I know people that only through Classic, people that I don't necessarily key with or whatever, people that I key with, or you may want to have a group for tanks or healers or whatever. This is called friend groups. It simply is just like a little custom add-on for your friends list, which is very handy. Next, people ask about my timer add-on in dungeons. I use an add-on called Mythic Plus Timer. It simply just reskins the base keystone UI and makes it a little bit cleaner. Personally, I think most people use a Weakauras nowadays. Again, this is kind of like a relic of how WoW used to be, and I'm just used to it. So that's what I use for that, if you're wondering. Next, an add-on that people ask very often about is OPI or OPI. This is an add-on that instead of having a button mapped to a keybind, it maps a radial wheel, and then you can move your mouse in a direction to cast a spell or ability or whatever. I would never use this for something that's rotational in combat. However, it's helpful for just silly things. For example, these are all of my dungeon portals for the season, and so I just have this on an F key in case I ever want to use a dungeon dungeon portal without going into my spell book. Another thing is I'll have like my mounts if I need to use a repair mount or auction house or mailbox or whatever. I have all those set up, you know, whatever. So that's an add-on that a lot of people don't know about that people ask. Next, you can see my tooltips in the bottom right it's moved. It has a little bit of custom functionality in terms of what it shows. It also doesn't show during combat. This is an add-on called Tiny Tooltip, and I simply just downloaded this to get a little bit more customization on my tooltips since I didn't like the way the base tooltips looked. So I'll have my profile for that if you, for whatever reason, want to copy that. Next is a somewhat new add-on. So WoW introduced a sort of like scaling diminishing returns with stats that can be a little bit harder to understand. However, if you use the add-on True Stat Values, it actually changes the tooltips of your stats and shows you where those breakpoints are and how much of each stat you're losing. Personally, I don't use this a whole lot. Like, you know, you're just following your stat priority in your guide and the items that you get anyway. But a lot of people like to see this sort of information anyway to at least understand things better. So yeah, that's what that add-on is called, True Stat Values. And lastly, an add-on that I want to shout out that was a lifesaver to me. A very old add-on. It's called Right-Click Modifier. A problem that I had is I would be healing. I would have a boss selected and using mouse overs. I would need to, you know, move my camera to move a certain way. And I would accidentally click on random allies or other, like, mobs, adds in the fight or whatever with my right click whenever I'm doing this. In theory, you shouldn't do this, but in practice, you know, when you're moving fast and worrying about a lot of things, it happens a lot more than you think. And I couldn't figure out how to fix it until I downloaded this add-on right-click modifier, and it simply just has one feature, and all it does is disable right-click targeting. So now, if you can see here, I'm spamming right-click. I'm like purposely trying to click on this guy and his mount, and I will never target anything while I'm right-clicking. So this is something that hopefully is useful to some people. When I was brand new to the game, it was like infuriating to me when I would keep doing that. I feel like it was really hard, especially as like a holy paladin or a disc priest that I needed to keep the boss targeted. I would randomly click on my allies and raid, and yeah, that's a pretty helpful add-on. So that wraps up the UI vid. Hopefully I explained everything. I try to just go quick because for the most part, everything should be just, okay, this is the add-on I want. You plug it in, it works for you. If you have any questions or things that I didn't go over, or things that you're wondering, drop them in the description. Or if you end up fixing stuff and you want to post something to help people out, that's also appreciated. Looking for input and advice going into the War Within expansion as well. And I will have a new UI video coming out around the time of the next expansion launch as well. So if you're watching this and that time has passed, you may want to look for the new vid. But anyway, thanks for watching. Good luck with your setup and happy keying, friends.